Hello everybody, Raven Knight here. Today is going to be a bit of a different kind of video. I've been getting a question coming across my desk quite frequently from my fans and from those who know that I play Dead by Daylight. And I want to address that question today because a new killer has come to Dead by Daylight that everyone's talking about, everyone's excited about, and they want to know my thoughts. Because I was asked my thoughts on this killer before he was even announced, and I gave my thoughts at the time. But before we get into that, let me make a quick confession. I've never been all that into horror as a genre. As a kid, I didn't like being scared of things, so horror movies and shows were never things I particularly enjoyed. I think the horror movies I saw from my childhood and into college were The Exorcist, the original Ringu movie, The Grudge, Hellraiser. I think I saw a Friday the 13th movie once. I read the Goosebumps books. I never really got into the show. I slowly grew more of an appreciation for horror as I got older, I admit. I began to recognize the effort, writing, and cinematography that it took to create the genre. And even now, as I've become a more accomplished writer, I recognize the skill it takes to write proper horror. I respect it, even if I'm not a huge fan of it. So to me, Dead by Daylight conceptually is a perfect game. It involves horror icons and original ones, in a game that is less based on horror and more on thrills. And don't underestimate that. The killers, as far as I'm concerned, aren't that scary, at least in terms of gameplay. I mean, obviously, if you met one in real life, they'd be scary, but I mean, in this game, they're not that scary. And playing as a survivor, I never felt the kind of terror that I would expect from an actual horror movie. And yet, like I said, you still get the sensation of dread and unease that you could be caught, found, or chased into a corner. Your classic thrill stuff. Of course, games don't always go that way, I admit, and if I'm being honest, it's often easier to stress out and bully the killer in most matches, but like I said, conceptually, the idea is a good one. And with each licensed killer from existing movies or games, when they add stuff like the Xenomorph, Michael Myers, Nemesis, Albert Wesker, Sadako, all these really cool licensed killers, I'm always pretty impressed with how they implement the killer and the unique style, abilities, and methods. It really does show a lot of care and concern, so whenever a new licensed killer comes out, I'm always very impressed. So, the big one now that we can finally get to the topic of this video, is Chucky. Yes, even before he was announced, people were asking me about my thoughts on adding Chucky to Dead by Daylight. And now that he has been officially added, I can give my thoughts on it officially. For those who don't know, Chucky is the iconic killer doll. He's become the newest killer in DBD, and I'll be real, okay, even back when it was first asked, and even now, I'm laughing at this idea. I think it's so silly. Not that his powers aren't good, because they are. Not that his perks aren't good, because they are. And not that he's a weak killer by any means, because he most certainly is not a weak killer, but because of all the horror movie icons I've seen, Chucky is probably the least frightening I can think of. Okay. Alright, so let me explain. Chucky got his start in the Child's Play franchise, where the creators were trying their hardest to actually sell the terror of a murdering child's toy. The story goes that serial killer Charles Lee Ray, on the verge of death, transfers his soul into a good guy doll to avoid the final judgment. Now, trapped in the body of a doll, Charles, now calling himself Chucky, is seeking a new body to take. He meets Andy, the first human he revealed his secrets to, and by the rules of his voodoo curse, Chucky must transfer his soul into Andy before time runs out. This remains the theme and goal of Chucky for the duration of the 3-movie series known as Child's Play. Chucky is trying to transfer his soul into either Andy or some other boy to get out of the doll's body. Now, as a horror character, I never found Chucky scary. Why? I can summarize it in 3 words. He's a doll. First of all, the good guy doll already looks creepy. What kid would want to play with that? But even if you don't find him that creepy, he's a doll. A freaking doll. Throughout the Child's Play franchise, Chucky's usual method of murder was to just play pretend like he's an ordinary doll, then surprise his victims by revealing himself to be alive before killing them with a weapon of some sort, usually a knife.
Don't give me that.
Amazing, isn't it?
But that's the thing. Chucky isn't a stalking, hunting killer like Michael Myers or Jason Voorhees who hunt down their prey and the prey just can't seem to get away. Usually what happens is they don't believe that Chucky's real, pick him up to say, this obviously isn't real, and then Chucky comes alive and kills them. I think most people recognize that Child's Play wasn't really all that scary, honestly, because later when the franchise was rebooted into the Chucky series, it was clearly no longer strictly horror, but more of horror comedy with a hint of romantic comedy mixed in, complete with a Bride of Chucky and Seed of Chucky. I think it's this series, that series, the Chucky series, not Child's Play, that Dead by Daylight is trying to embody in their new character, because in the Chucky series, Chucky is way funnier than he is scary, and that just works far better as far as I'm concerned. And in Dead by Daylight, let's be real, he's hilarious. Okay, when I get into a match with this guy, and believe me, you get into a lot of trials with Chucky right now, when I see that little twerp chasing me through the trial, I just start laughing. I'm half tempted to turn around and just punt him across the map. When he jumps up and does his slash, I kind of get the giggles. It's just so funny watching him try to slash me. Watching him crawl under pallets or jump over vault locations. He doesn't even jump over them. He kind of crawls over them like a little kid. It's precious. And don't get me started on the dozens upon dozens of goofy lines this guy has, including the wild screaming he does when performing his slice and dice attack. Look, Chucky is, in every conceivable way, a joke. Look, mechanically, he works fine. He has a unique power that, combined with his tiny size, makes him very hard to anticipate and makes him a great ambush killer. His perks are pretty strong and can be used to great effect to really push survivors and punish them. And there are even moments I forget how silly he is during the chase. I'll start running away because I'll feel the slash and I'm like, oh man, the killer's after me, the killer's after me. And then I get downed and he does that super goofy and over-the-top cackle before summoning up the ghostly visage of Charles Lee Ray to not only scoop me up into his arm, but to scoop up Chucky with him. You just see this ghostly image carrying this doll around with your body, and it's like, what? Enlighten me. How do you take that seriously? I applaud behavior for creating a unique killer and for finding a way to make him viable in the game. Y'all did a great job. But I gotta say, Chucky is less scary to me and more hysterical. And many would say that's the point. Dead by Daylight isn't trying to be scary, it's more meant to be funny. I mean, just look at the trailer for Chucky. You weren't really meant to be afraid of this thing, you were meant to laugh at it, and Chucky is a famous horror staple, so it makes sense that they'd say, we're not gonna go as scary with Chucky, we're just gonna go kind of childish, kind of funny, kind of jokey. But I say all this to bring up a discussion point from earlier, because back before this was announced and people were asking me, should Chucky be in Dead by Daylight, I didn't really want him to be, nor did I really care all that much, because I always said the same thing. Is Chucky even that scary? I mean, as a concept? I don't think the character was ever that frightening to me, but more just goofy. I feel like a lot of leaps in logic have to be made in order to make some of his feats believable. Now, like, for example, how could he kill some people? He's a tiny doll. Like I said, how could he get the energy to kill people? I remember in the second Child's Play movie, he used a yardstick to beat a lady to death. How do you do that? How would a normal person beat someone to death with a yardstick? I don't get it. I've heard some say that he has the strength of an adult human despite his size, which I don't know. I remember him being lifted and tossed around plenty in the movies, so I don't know about that. But even if he does have the strength of a normal human, I feel like his victims have to be in just the right circumstances for him to be effective. Look, the concept of a killer doll, period, I just find laughable. Now, some people would argue, you gotta read the extended lore, or you gotta read this comic, or you gotta read this book, or you gotta hear director's notes. To me, I've only seen like a few of his movies, and based on what I saw in the movies, I don't see anything that scary about him. For me, the real horror would be if I was the one trapped as a doll. See, now that is a horror concept if you ask me. Chucky shouldn't have been the killer. He should have been the victim in his horror story. A man trapped in a doll's body, desperately trying to find a way out before he can't escape it at all. I mean, damn. He's just lucky the doll is still a male doll. Can you imagine if he ended up in a Barbie or a Bratz doll? Death might just be a preferable outcome to that. I couldn't imagine waking up and seeing I'm made of plastic with artificial hair and stuff. Ugh, it's actually horrifying to think about. And the good guy doll is a doll with voice lines. Just the thought of being forced to say things you don't want to say just because someone pushes a button or pulls a string. That's terrifying. But a small doll walking around with a kitchen knife and cackling maniacally as he tries to kill people over 5 times his size? I'm sorry, that's just funny. Especially when you consider that in his 5th movie, The Seed of Chucky, Chucky straight up owns his new life as a killer doll. He doesn't mind anymore. Only his girlfriend Tiffany, who was forced into the body of a doll herself, wants to be a human again.
I'm fucking infamous. I'm one of the most notorious slashers in history, and I don't want to give that up. I am Chucky, the killer doll, and I dig it!
I don't know, while I kind of see the comedic appeal of Chucky, I simply don't see him as frightening or fear-inducing. See, the concept of a killer doll chasing after me doesn't scare me when I know that I could kick this thing across a football field without much effort. The concept of being stuck as a doll? That I find far more horrifying. That's a scary concept. Someone make that into a horror movie or something. That's a scary thought. Now, of course, I'll still do a video on Chucky's lore when I get to him, and I'll talk about his powers and perks as well when I get there. But my goal here was more to talk about the absurdity of the killer doll thing as a whole, and why I wasn't super fond of the idea of Chucky as a killer in Dead by Daylight. I just had to share my thoughts where that's concerned. I mean, everyone's been asking my thoughts on Chucky and DBD ever since, even before he was announced, honestly. And I guess that's just what I have to say. Back then, before he was announced, I just said, I don't see Chucky as that scary, so I don't really think he would fit well into Dead by Daylight. But now that he isn't Dead by Daylight, I've realized, it's not that he's scary, it's that he's iconic. Dead by Daylight isn't concerned with adding scary characters. They're concerned with adding iconic characters, characters we're going to remember, characters that are going to stay with us, characters that embody different aspects of the horror genre. They don't have to scare us. We just have to recognize them. And if that's what they were going for with Chucky, well, they succeeded. As a killer in DBD, he is definitely pretty strong, I'll give him that. But as a killer and a character, I just find him a joke. And you know what? If that was the joke Dead by Daylight was playing, that was a pretty good knee slapper, I gotta say. So, definitely, guys, if you haven't tried out Chucky in Dead by Daylight, give him a shot. He is pretty fun to play. He's kind of creative. I've actually enjoyed playing him. Well, I've been playing Tiffany just because I find her voice easier to listen to. Did they actually get Jennifer Tilly to do her voice? If they actually did, that's awesome. If not, it's a pretty good impressionist. Chucky himself, I don't know. There's something grating about his voice. It drives me crazy. But that's beside the point. Playing against Chucky is nightmare inducing, not because he's scary, but because his power's really good. But anyway, guys, that's all I have for this video. I just thought I'd share that. What do you guys think? Do you agree that Chucky's kind of a joke of a killer? Were you guys scared of him as a kid when you saw his movies? Do you think that he's scarier than I'm giving him credit for? What do you think of my alternative idea that the real horror is not being stalked by a killer doll, but the fact that you could be trapped as a doll? Whew, that's scary. Anyway, thank you guys so much for watching, and as always, I will see you in my next video. Take care.